Welcome to the Human Development and Leadership webinar Short Takes series. This clip is one of 4 short takes from an October 2016 webinar on leading through generational conflict. Information on our speakers, Carolann, Wolfgang, and Marilyn Manda, can be found at the end of the clip. Just pause on the slides to read their bios and contact information. Take a minute to give us some feedback by commenting on the HD&L myasq.org community page. We want to know what you think.
We call it this leading through conflict approach also because we wanted to make sure we get everyone to understand that this is so helpful to get us through complexity in the workplace, whether it's complexity with our technology that we're working with or complexity with how we're matrixed in the organization and our project teams. All of these things will be discussed and helped because we know how we get through conflict better. We gain flexibility as well by understanding how to problem solve better. If we can get through that wall, that initial wall of conflict, we will come out the other end of that and the other side of that with a better problem solving technique, and that's a guarantee. And we hear about, we need resilience. We hear a lot in the literature, in the business literature now, and in the business schools about having resilience personally in our organization. Well, this is a great tool for that. And it's so positive. This is making your life as an individual really different when you understand how to deal with conflict. It's very life-affirming. No matter, again, we talk about workplace here, and we're talking about generational issues in the workplace, but this goes beyond, right? It goes to family, it goes to our community environment, so all of those things are affected in the same way once we learn how to do this in our own workplace. Okay, Marilyn, next slide, please.
Sorry, it's lagging a little bit.
That's okay. So this is just a list of how conflict does affect us or can affect us. And as you read through that list, I'd love to see hands with you guys who's actually experienced some of these effects. Less productivity. Your productivity might have been hurt. Maybe you have caught a cold or have had health issues from stress of conflicts. You might feel a lack of support. As a quality professional, maybe you've noticed in others who you're working with, or if you're a safety professional, that people could have accidents when they're in conflicts, when they're stressed out. There could be greater errors in the workplace, and many of you have raised your hands again. And I can say that, again, personally, coming into this, boy, I felt all of these things at one point, some simultaneously. With the end result of these things is that we end up feeling helpless, and that's just a no-win situation for any of us. It's not going to help us at all. And it's really that last point on the slide is that you can see, just looking at that list, how it can easily turn into this downward spiral and become real depression or other really big anxiety issue. So conflict affects us in a huge way, and I tell you that if it's affecting you this way, it's affecting the other person who you're dealing with too. So sometimes when we do lose perspective, we think we're really injured in the conflict, and we may very well be injured. The other party is definitely injured too, no matter if they're putting on a brave face or however you might view them. Again, coming back to humans and our human connection, we're all injured from conflict in some way. And so that could help you to be a reminder that that other person is being affected too, even though they're pretending they're not. right? They're having one of these issues listed on the screen. And so using process thinking, we talked about process. So what is that about? To describe that a little bit in more detail, well, there's a range of approaches with typical conflict management or resolution. Those approaches are really depending on how much you want to engage in the conflict. So you can engage a high amount in the conflict or very low amount in the conflict. When you prevent conflict, as we're trying to do, talk about proactive ways to techniques to prevent conflict, we're negotiating collaboratively together as a team or as partners. That's high engagement. You're sitting there with the other person, for example, and you're talking with them. So that's one side. The whole other side of this continuum with conflict resolution is going to court, right? Perhaps you get sued. So, people sometimes think going to court allows them a lot of engagement and to have their say, but it's actually it's actually on the very low engagement range. You usually have a lawyer help you through that process, or maybe a mediator. Then it could be a little bit more highly engaged for you. But generally, you go to court, you say what you have to say, and you have no control over the decision that the judge makes. So we can see conflict resolution or management as it's typically spoke of along this big continuum. And the start of the process, the start of the roadmap that Marilyn and I speak of here is self-awareness and the recognition of where you want to be on that continuum. So for example, I chose many years ago that I wanted to be engaged. I was afraid to be engaged, but I was going to learn this skill as a natural resource manager dealing with communities and a lot of different government agencies, especially. Boy, I just needed to understand the skill better. And so that's the side of this continuum that I decided to be on. And again, we wanted to make a point that, so we talk about this process and you can choose. There still are intractable conflicts. Or there could be conflicts you choose not to be involved with. And we make a point on the slide that says, now that's not that you're sitting stewing over a current conflict and you're avoiding it, but actually that's a conflict that you choose not to be involved with, i.e., I'm walking down the street, there's a bully on that street, and they start cursing at me and, whatever, saying lewd things to me. I'm really not going to stop and engage that person and try to reason with them and have a nice, proactive, collaborative negotiation. I'm really not a bad person, That's something that I'm never going to see that person again, likely, and they're a bully, and I refuse to get engaged with that person. So those instances, of course, where you'll decide not to be involved, and that's perfectly fine, right? And so that's a little bit about how we're thinking about this process or continuum for conflict. And so the thing that Marilyn and I, how we would like to see this is in terms of interest-based style. So those of you who've read about conflict or have had some training in it, you recognize that there are two different ways we can go. We can go in a positional, so-called positional way into conflict, or an interest-based solutions way into conflict. So for example, if you take a position, so Marilyn and I are going to take some positions here. I want an orange. Marilyn wants the orange. There's one orange. We're going into this conflict with a position. We both want the orange. And then eventually, that's pretty much a zero-sum game. That's a fixed pie. One of us will get the orange. The other one will be left with no orange. Going into this differently, however, and not positionally, but more in terms of an interest-based solution way. I want the orange, Marilyn. I know that you want the orange. Marilyn, what do you want the orange for? I would ask.
I'm really hungry.
Okay, so now I've learned that, well, Marilyn's real interest is that she's hungry. She's going to want the fruit in the orange. But the whole time, I'm a baker. It is true. Actually, I love baking, and so I wanted the rind of the orange so that I could use it as zest. I don't really care about the inside. And so that's my interest. And then if we go further in this example, we can see that we can both get something out of this. It's not zero-sum. It's not a fixed pie. Marilyn's going to get what she wants. I'm going to get what I want. And that's resolved. That's resolving the conflict. And so interests are different. On this slide, we say interests are different than you may initially believe for yourself. Sometimes what I've seen in conflicts is that we may be so caught up in emotion ourselves that we have lost our interests, or we've been so influenced to say, again, I want $500 or nothing. That's it. But it's not really, that's my position. It's not really my interest. What I really might want is, 20 bucks, an apology, a very heartfelt apology, and a letter of reference. I don't know. It's something. I usually want a suite of other things that are officially satisfying my interests. And one of the things about this position versus interest situation is when you, as a mediator, I would go and sit in small claims court locally here, which is something that's, it's kind of intense. You leave there, wondering about humanity sometimes because you hear all sorts of things, right? What you find when you sit in small claims court is people will come in and they'll think that they will leave feeling powerful and feeling very satisfied. But most of the time that is just not true. They don't leave satisfied and they don't feel very powerful. So, because in small claims court, you're hanging on to your position. I want this and that's it. I don't care about anything else. So it's a very interesting topic, and how we approach things is really with the interest-based style of negotiation, and that lends itself to not only solving conflicts, but really just offering opportunity for innovation, and that's what we're going to talk about.